Do you remember the first time you held a cell phone? Maybe it was heavy, the size of a brick, with a long black antenna you had to pull up before making a call. Or maybe yours was thinner, a silver flip phone that snapped shut with a satisfying click. Whichever one you remember, chances are it said one word on the front: Motorola. They invented the cell phone. They ruled the world for decades. And then they disappeared. So what really happened to the company that gave humanity its voice on the go? This is the rise and the fall of Motorola. Long before Motorola became a household name, it was just a small workshop in Chicago. The year was 1928. Two brothers, Paul and Joseph Galvin, pooled together just $750 and bought a bankrupt battery company. They had only 5 employees and almost no future because within a year, the Great Depression had wiped out their entire market. But Paul Galvin was a stubborn man. He looked at America's growing love for the automobile and asked a simple question: why can't a car have a radio? In 1930, he built one of the first commercial car radios and gave it a brand new name: Motorola, a blend of motor and Victrola. That single idea changed everything. During World War II, Motorola built the famous handy-talkie radios that helped American soldiers communicate on the battlefield. And in 1969, when Neil Armstrong took his first step on the moon, his voice traveled back to Earth through Motorola equipment. From a Chicago basement to the surface of the moon, Motorola was unstoppable. It was April 3rd, 1973. A man named Marty Cooper stood on a busy sidewalk on 6th Avenue in Manhattan, holding something nobody had ever seen before. It looked like a brick with an antenna. It weighed nearly 2.5 pounds, and it was about to change the world forever. Cooper, an engineer at Motorola, pulled out a small phone book, dialed a number, and made the very first public call from a handheld mobile phone. And here's the best part. He called his biggest rival, Joel Engel at Bell Labs, just to tell him Motorola had won the race. There was silence on the other end of the line. That phone was called the Dynatac. Cooper's team had built it in just 90 days. It had hundreds of hand-wired parts, gave you 30 minutes of talk time, and needed 10 hours to charge. But here's something most people don't know: that phone didn't reach stores for another 10 years. When the Dynatac finally launched in 1983, it cost nearly $4,000. That's about $12,000 in today's money, and people lined up to buy it. Through the late 80s and early 90s, Motorola wasn't just a company, it was a status symbol. If you owned a Motorola phone, you had arrived in life. In 1989, they launched the MicroTac, the smallest and lightest cell phone the world had ever seen. Suddenly, you didn't need a briefcase to carry your phone. You could slip it into your jacket pocket. Doctors, lawyers, Wall Street bankers, everyone wanted one. Then came 1996, and Motorola did it again. They introduced the StarTAC, the world's first true flip phone. It weighed just 3 ounces. It opened with a flick of the wrist, and it cost up to $2,000. To put that in perspective, by weight, the StarTAC was more expensive than gold. By the mid-90s, Motorola was the #1 mobile phone maker on planet Earth. They invented the technology. They dominated the market. They had the coolest designs. Nothing could stop them. At least, that's what they believed. While Motorola was celebrating the StarTAC, the world was quietly changing underneath their feet. The mobile industry was moving from analog technology to digital, faster networks, clearer calls, text messaging. The future was digital, and everyone could see it coming. Everyone except Motorola. The company had spent decades perfecting analog phones. Their engineers loved them. Their factories were built for them. And so, instead of jumping ahead, Motorola hesitated. They kept making analog phones long after the world had moved on. A small Finnish company saw the opening and took it. Nokia started flooding the market with sleek, easy-to-use digital phones. By 1998, the unthinkable happened. Nokia overtook Motorola as the world's #1 mobile phone maker. The throne was gone. That same year, Motorola posted a loss of nearly $1 billion. They announced 15,000 layoffs. The Galvin family's empire, built over 70 years, was suddenly on shaky ground, and the worst was still to come. Even while Motorola was bleeding money, they made a bet so big, so bold, it sounded like science fiction. They called it Iridium. The idea was breathtaking. Motorola would launch 66 satellites into low Earth orbit, creating a global network that could connect a phone call from anywhere on the planet, the middle of the ocean, the top of Mount Everest, the Sahara Desert, no more dead zones, anywhere on Earth. The cost? Almost $5 billion. In 1998, Iridium finally went live, and then reality hit. The phones were the size of bricks. They cost $3,000 each. Calls were up to $8 a minute. And worst of all, the phones didn't work indoors, inside cars, or in big cities, because they needed a direct line of sight to the sky. Who exactly was going to buy this? Almost nobody. After spending billions, Iridium had only 10,000 customers. In August 1999, Iridium filed for bankruptcy, one of the 20 largest in American history. By 2003, most people had written Motorola off. The company was wounded, losing money, and falling behind. And then, out of nowhere, came one of the greatest comebacks in tech history. In November 2004, Motorola launched a phone unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was a slim, sleek, anodized aluminum flip phone, just half an inch thick. They called it the Razr, and it didn't just sell, it exploded. The Razr became a fashion statement. Celebrities carried it on red carpets. Teenagers begged their parents for it. By 2006, Motorola was selling 50 million Razrs a year. That's roughly 137,000 phones every single day. In total, the Razr sold over 130 million units, making it the best-selling flip phone in history. But here's the tragedy. Motorola fell in love with their own success. Instead of inventing the next great phone, they just made more Razrs. Pink ones, black ones, gold ones. The world was about to change again, and Motorola wasn't ready. January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and held up a small glass rectangle. No keypad, no antenna, just a screen. He called it the iPhone. And in that single moment, the entire mobile industry was rewritten. Motorola had no answer. While Apple was building an ecosystem of apps, music, and software, Motorola was still selling flip phones. Their early smartphones flopped. Their stock collapsed. Billionaire investor Carl Icahn bought a huge stake and demanded the company be broken up. In 2009, Motorola tried one last comeback. The Droid, running Google's Android. It was good. Time magazine called it the gadget of the year. But it wasn't enough. Samsung, HTC, and Apple had already taken the market. In 2011, Motorola officially split into two companies. And then came the final blow. Google bought Motorola Mobility for $12.5 billion, mostly for its patents. Just 3 years later, in 2014, Google sold it off to a Chinese company called Lenovo for less than $3 billion. The company that invented the cell phone had been sold for scrap. Today, Motorola still exists, quietly making phones under Lenovo's name. But the giant that once ruled the world is gone. The company that gave humanity the cell phone couldn't survive the cell phone era. Motorola's story is a warning to every great company. Success can make you proud. Pride can make you slow. And in technology, the slow are the first to fall. Marty Cooper, the man who made that first call in 1973, is still alive today at 97 years old. He once said the future belongs to those who keep moving forward. Motorola simply stopped moving.